Hi, this is Pastor Wes Gunther, and welcome to Redeemed and Revived. This podcast reflects both the pulpit ministry at Cedar Hill Baptist Church of Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, as well as some studio-recorded lessons. Thank you for joining with us today.
As we come to this portion of Luke chapter 8, he had just left off on the parable of the sower and the seeds, and now he says we're going to get into the boat, we're going to go to the other side. As they're traveling across that lake, he falls asleep in the boat. Jesus doesn't have any motion sickness, does he? That's not something he worries about. He's the master of the sea. And so we know that even in the midst of him sleeping, and in the midst of this probably being a somewhat short travel, he fell asleep. He sleeps, but the winds kick up, and the storm begins to rage, and the boat is having a tough time on this body of water, staying afloat and getting to shore. This is becoming an issue. So the disciples, of course, turn to Jesus, and they ask him for help. Master, Master, they wake him up. Help us. They fear that they're going to perish, that they're going to be caught in this storm, that they're going to drown out here on this lake. And Jesus, first thing he does, of course, is stops the raging of the storm. He calms the sea. But then he turns to them with that question, that rebuke, it looks like, right? Rebuke. Where is your faith? I've preached this passage before, and I've always found this passage to be one that is taxing, a little questionable as far as being able to dive into it and figure out exactly what's going on here. For this simple reason, just on the surface of understanding. People are worried about the storm they are in, and they turn to Jesus for help. That seems like the right thing to do. Right? On the surface, that seems like the right thing to do. It seems like the right thing just looking at it as is, but we've got to get into the story to find out what exactly it is that Jesus rebukes them for here. And so, first and foremost, and I highlighted this as I read it before we prayed, Jesus said to them, we're getting in the boat, and we're going to what? Go to the other side. And so lesson one there, when Jesus says you're going to the other side, you're going to the other side. You're not going to drown. You're not going to perish. Their fear was they weren't going to make it, but they had forgotten those most important words that Jesus uttered to them just before they left, and that is, guess what, guys? We're going to get in the boat, and we're going to the other side. Jesus didn't get in the boat with them and say, hold on, yeah, good luck. Hold on, fasten your seatbelts, folks. That's exactly what I was thinking. Right? He doesn't get in and give them the idea that this might be a difficult thing. He gets in and says, we're going to the other side, and on the way there, I'm taking a nap. It doesn't matter how much the storm rages in your life. When Jesus says we're getting to the other side, we're getting to the other side. Which goes back to our theme for the year, right? The King is coming. Jesus said, I'm going to prepare a place for you. I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. Listen, we're going to the other side. And sometimes the storm's raging and we start to lose a little hope and we start to lose a little patience and we get very upset. But isn't it great to know that Jesus says, where I am, you're going to be. We're going to the other side. Don't worry too much about the storm. It might be difficult. Listen, Jesus didn't tell them, this is I think the second important point of this particular account, he didn't tell them, ignore the storm. When they prayed, and we're going to use the word pray, they went to Jesus, literally and physically. He was with them, so they awoke him from his sleep, his human sleep. They called on his divine nature to help them out of this perilous time, and Jesus didn't ignore their request. He didn't say, that's nothing, right? Jesus didn't say, oh, you think that storm's something? You should have seen the one Noah was in, Jesus didn't say any of that. So he didn't belittle their concern. He stopped the storm for them. He calmed the sea. He heeded their request. I think that's very important. And then Jesus said, where is your faith? not because they came to him. He didn't want, I don't think Jesus wanted them holding on to the sides of the boat with white knuckles, losing their lunch, right? Being fearful they were going to die. That wasn't what Jesus wanted out of this. But he didn't want them to worry that they were going to perish. Why? Because he told them they were going to the other side. And if Jesus is in your boat and he says we're going to the other side, we're going to the other side. I believe it would have been very different if they would have come to him and said, Jesus, a bunch of us are getting really sick. Can you help us out? I know we're going to the other side, but it's awful rough on the way there. And Jesus would have calmed the sea and not chided them for lack of faith. The problem is they came in fear and anxiety. Lord, we're going to die. We're going to die out here. And Jesus is like, you're not going to die. Not today. I'm with you. And we're going to the other side. He took a nap. He gave them a perspective of how to face some of those problems that they were going to face. Just rest in the assurance of God's promise and command. I think that's an important lesson for us and one that's very applicable to where we are at in life. The storms are going to come up. We're not always going to be able to avoid the storms. Jesus is with us in the midst of the storms. Jesus has promised our future and where we're going to be. That doesn't change. Jesus cares when we call out. Those are some important lessons from that first story. The second one starts in verse 26, and that's the wild man of Gadara. That's kind of, we refer to him as that. Some of the Bibles might call him the demoniac of Gadara, a man that's demon-possessed. And we see all those things. Brother Marshall read through it. I'm not going to read through it again. But here's one of those things that we have learned. I have found, and right now I'm preaching through the book of Luke, and we're highlighting these different stories. And as I'm preaching, I want to emphasize the lessons that we can learn from those stories. I'm not teaching the historical account. I'm preaching the principles from the story. I was able to do that a couple of years ago. If you remember, we went through the book of Numbers. And when I first tackled the book of Numbers, I looked at that as a monumental task. On paper, that doesn't seem like an overly exciting book, but we're going to look at it. And there were a lot of great stories in there, and there are a lot of things I learned. I hopefully you did too. One of them was in Numbers chapter 32. And so keep your finger here. Go back to Numbers 32. And so here's the interesting tie-in. I hope this is important to you. This is important to me as your pastor, as we're trying to preach through the Word of God and the full counsel of Scripture. Listen, when we were in Numbers 32, when I preached that a couple of years ago, we turned to Luke chapter 8 because of the corresponding story. So now that we're in Luke 8, let's look back and be reminded of what we saw in Numbers 32. 32 verse 1. This seems like just some details, but all these details give us some insight and some importance. Numbers 32 verse 1, now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of what? Cattle. Yeah, well, that's important because when we get to Luke chapter 8, suddenly they're pigs, right? Centuries later, the area is known for swine, but here they had a lot of cattle. When they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that behold, the place was a place for cattle, the children of Gad, the children of Reuben, came and spake unto Moses and to Eleazar the priest and unto the princes of the congregation, and they list all their names there. I'm going to jump down to the middle of verse 4. Even the country which the Lord smote before the congregation of Israel, it's a land for cattle, and thy servants have cattle. Wherefore, said they, if we have found grace in thy sight, let this land be given unto thy servants for a possession, and bring us not over the Jordan River. All right, you can stop. Turn back to Luke chapter 8. Real quick reminder of history here. The Israelites are going to get ready to possess the land. They went to the edge of Canaan, right? They sent out 12 spies. 10 of them said, we can't do this. 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, said we can. But they listened to the 10. Because of that, they had to wander for 40 years. Most of the book of Numbers tells us what happened in those 40 years. We're getting to the end there in chapter 32, the end of the book of Numbers. And now plans are in place for possessing the land. They were supposed to do that 40 years before. It didn't happen. So now we have a younger generation. Remember, all those over the age of 20 died out there in the wilderness. They didn't get to go in. So now we have their children and children's children getting ready to possess the land. And they're laying out a plan. This is what we're going to do. This is who's going to lead you. It's Joshua that's going to lead them in. We're all going to go over the Jordan River. We're going to take the land that was Abraham's land. It was Abraham and Jacob's land. Remember that? Isaac, Jacob, all that. They had that land until they had to leave because of the famine. They were imprisoned by Pharaoh over 400 years of time there. They were imprisoned and made slaves. Moses had led them out. They're going back to the land that was their land. I think that's important to point out. In our current culture of people criticizing the nation of Israel, being people that just run people off, it was their land. They left, they got imprisoned into slavery. They came back to retake their land, the land that God had already given them. Just thought I'd throw that out there. They're getting ready to take it, and these two tribes, tribe of Gad, tribe of Reuben, say, we like this land on the eastern side of the Jordan River. It's really good for the cattle we have. Most of the land is on the western side of the Jordan River because of the way they're coming in, right? So Moses and then eventually Joshua is going to tell them, all of us are going to go across the Jordan and we're going to take the land back. That's the Battle of Jericho and then the Battle of Ai and all the other ones as they take their land. Once it's all done and we settle down, then you, Reuben, Gad, and it'll eventually be half of Manasseh, 2.5 tribes, are going to move back across the Jordan and take the land that Moses, ultimately God said they could have. We want this land. This is good cattle land. This is good land for the cattle we're going to raise. That's what the tribe of Gad said to Moses and then to Joshua. God allowed them to have that land for their cattle. Now fast forward to the time of Christ. Jesus is walking around the promised land, the nation of Israel. And he makes his way by boat over to this land of the Gadarenes. That would be the descendants of Gad. And he gets there and he's going to deal with this demon-possessed man. And what type of animal is over the hillside? Not cattle, right? Now listen, this is not one farmer. We know that because at the end of the story, most of the people in the town were upset because they had lost their swine, and they all asked Jesus to leave because they didn't appreciate what had happened to their swine. Jesus goes to the land of the people of Gad, and they are now swine farmers. Isn't that should be odd? Knowing the Jewish people, what are they doing with pigs? I mean, what are they doing with pigs? I don't know. It's not for fur. I don't think anybody makes anything out of pig fur. Do they even have fur, you know? What do you do with pig? You don't do anything but pig but make bacon, right? I mean, that's what you do with it, and the Jewish people don't eat that. So what are they doing with it? I guess they're selling it, right? Seriously, I guess they're selling it. I don't know. But that's what they're raising. This even goes against their tradition. It goes against their religion. It went against what they had originally said, their forefathers had said they wanted the land for. And so here's a land now known for swine. I don't think Jesus had any problem sending those demons into the pigs. I don't think he had any problem with it at all. They had gone against every rule in the book from every which direction. And it was the demon's idea, right? The demon said, don't cast us into the deep. I don't know why what that would have made, but please put us into the pigs. They can only possess, this is important, one of the things we know about demons, they possess life. I don't think your house is haunted. Whether or not you think it's haunted, your house is not haunted. It's not a living being. Demons take up residence in a living being. And so when they knew they were going to be cast out, and isn't this one of the greatest affirmations that Jesus Christ was divine? The demons knew who he was, The demons the demons knew they didn't stand a chance. Jesus showed up. The wild man of Gadara, who is demon-possessed, is doing all kinds of bizarre things. They don't know what to do with this guy. Jesus shows up, and the demons immediately start bargaining. Where are we going to go? Because they know they're not sticking around. When Jesus is there, they're gone. They're done. Put us into the swine, and Jesus allowed that to happen. I think Jesus was just as happy to let that happen. The swine ran into the sea and drowned themselves. Isn't that something? Wonder if, just a side note there, demon-possessed people who dabble with satanic things, demonology, that's a scary thing. Just for the point here, the pigs were smart enough, right, to say this is no way to live. Listen to me. I'm not trying to belittle the fact that some people with demon ties might contemplate suicide. The ultimate answer is Jesus Christ. The pigs didn't have that option, but the pigs knew that with a demon in them, there was no way to live. It wasn't worth living. The pigs took their own lives because of the demon possession that was upon them. So the people asked Jesus to leave, and he got in the boat, the Bible tells us, and he left. And that's where we left off with our Bible reading this morning in verse number 40. Verse 41, let's pick up with our third story. And in the midst of that, we'll see the fourth one. They parallel each other here. Verse 41, behold, there came a man named Jairus. He was a ruler of the synagogue, so he was a religious man. He fell down at Jesus' feet and besought him that he would come into his house, for he had only one daughter, about 12 years of age, and she lay dying. But as he went, the people thronged him. He was trying to get to this gentleman's house, but the people were upon him. And we see in the midst of that then this fourth story, verse 43, a woman having an issue of blood for 12 years, which had spent all of her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any. She came behind him, touched the border of his garment, and immediately her issue of blood stopped. It stopped. Verse 45, Jesus said, who touched me? When all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, Master, the multitude throng thee, they press thee, and thou sayest, who touched me? And Jesus said, somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling, falling down before him. She declared unto him before all the people for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. And he said unto her, daughter, be of good comfort, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace. We see this important lesson here. Jesus saying, someone just touched me. The disciples said, well, of course someone touched you, Jesus. There's a throng of people around you. You're getting bumped and jostled around. People are just coming up to you constantly. Of course somebody bumped into you. Of course somebody touched you. It's like you're trying to walk onto a Delta airplane, right? It's boarding call. Somebody bumped into me. Do you think so, right? It's a jostle of people. It's a crowd of people trying to get in, even more so trying to get off of a plane. Of course somebody bumped into you. Of course somebody touched you. That's what the disciples are saying. They're downplaying that. They don't understand the importance here. Well, of course someone bumped into you, Jesus. Jesus said, no. This was different. And the lady realized that this wasn't going to end. She had to show herself. She had to talk to him. She had reached up and touched the hem of his garment. She, by faith, believed that just touching the garment of Jesus was enough to heal her of her lifelong illness and problem. And sure enough, it was. By faith, she believed. She didn't have to get Jesus' attention, right? But think of that from her human perspective. She didn't have to get his attention. She didn't have to have a one-on-one meeting. She didn't say, can we make an appointment? Can I see you later? There were people that did that, right? Didn't Nicodemus do that? He came and met Jesus kind of off hours in the dark, late at night, and Jesus met him. He made an appointment with Jesus and said, I want to sit down. I have questions. I want to talk to you. Nicodemus came and at an appointed time and met Jesus in a private place so he could talk to him and question him. That was not unheard of. This lady didn't make an appointment. She had spent, it says, her entire living, all of her savings, everything she had to try to fix this health problem that had plagued her for so long. Now she came and just touched his garment because she knew by faith that's all she had to do. No money, no appointment, no coming up. Jesus, by the way, my name is Rachel and I'm having this problem. And she knew, listen, by faith she knew that Jesus knew all about her problem. And when she touched his garment, Jesus knew the power, the divine power that had just healed that woman. And he stopped the crowd and he stopped his disciples and he found this woman and she presented herself. He knew who she was, but she presented herself to Jesus. Jesus said, "Your faith hath healed thee." Your faith. That's interesting. Again, this is not by accident. Earlier in chapter 8, Jesus had said to the disciples on the boat, "Where is your faith? You're worried you're going to die out here. I said we're going to the other side. You're worried you're going to die. Where's your faith?" And moments later, it looks like, right, at least in the story, this lady reaches out, touches his garment, and Jesus said, "Great is your faith. You believed." And her faith healed her instantly of the disease that had plagued her for a lifetime. This is happening while he's trying to get to Jairus' daughter. All of this is delaying the time of getting to Jairus' daughter. And what's going to happen with Jairus' daughter? She's going to die before he gets there. Verse, let me pick up where we were, 49. While he yet spake, there cometh one from the rulers of the synagogue's house, saying unto him, "Thy daughter is dead, trouble not the master." Jairus is with Jesus. Jairus is trying to get Jesus back to his house to help his daughter. And the servants, the message comes from his house, "It's too late. Your daughter's died." Imagine the emotion. Imagine what Jairus is thinking. Listen, from Jairus' perspective, this lady just got healed, but she stopped Jesus from getting to his house in time. All these people are taking his attention. Jairus needed Jesus right now, he thought. I need Jesus right now. It's urgent right now. And these people are stopping him. And the message comes, "It's too late. Your daughter is dead." Jesus heard it. He answered him, saying, "Fear not, believe only, and she shall be made whole." He's telling Jairus what? Keep the faith. Keep the faith. It's never too late with Jesus. Verse 51, when he came into the house, he suffered no man to go in except Peter, James, and John. Those are his three closest disciples. They go with him most places. And we have the father and the mother of the little girl. Mom, dad, Peter, James, John, and Jesus. That's the six that are there. They wept. They bewailed her. But he said, "Weep not. She's not dead, but sleepeth." And they laughed him to scorn, knowing that she was dead. Who laughed? I don't know. We've just limited the crowd down to six that seemingly would not be laughing at this other people or these other ones outside the room. Or is it even mom and dad? I don't know. But they laughed him to scorn, knowing she was dead. In other words, Jesus said, "Don't worry, it's okay, I got it." And the people are saying, "Jesus, she's gone. It's too late. She's not breathing anymore. She died." They don't understand. They're scornful of this opportunity that Jesus thinks is there, and they see is gone. He put them all out. So it looks like the disciples and mom and dad, looks like. He put them all out and took her by the hand and said, "Maid, arise." Her spirit came again. She arose straightway. He commanded to give her meat. Her parents were astonished, but he charged them that they should tell no man what was done. Jesus restored life where there was no life. This parallels our message from last weekend, on Easter weekend. Jesus overcame death. Jesus raised himself from the dead, right? There was no one there to raise Jesus from the dead. Jesus rose himself from the dead. But when this young lady died, this 12-year-old girl died, Jesus was there, and Jesus prayed, and the Spirit re-entered her. We see this later with others like Lazarus that had died. And yet when Jesus came, he restores life. The people were laughing. The people were scorning. They're like, it's too late. She's already gone. And Jesus prays with her and comes out and says, oh, by the way, she's hungry. Go make her something to eat, right? Isn't that what he does? He comes out and says, give her meat. Give her something to eat. She's hungry. The people are overwhelmed. They're astonished. They can't. She was clearly dead. There were witnesses of her being dead. They laughed at his promises because she was already dead, and yet he raised her from the dead. He had power over death in her life. Listen, we saw examples here of faith, right? The disciples, a lack of faith. When they should have had it, a lack of faith. Jesus still helped them, but there was a lack of faith. We saw even the demons recognized who Jesus was. The wild man, the demonic man, was healed of his demon possession, but even the demons knew who Jesus was and what was going on. They verified who he was. We see the woman who had gone to doctor after every type of possible thing. I'm sure she tried every option out there. And she went and just touched his garment and by faith was healed. And then we see the leader, the ruler of the synagogue, go to Jesus for help when he doesn't know where else to turn to save his daughter. And it even appears to be way too late. And yet when Jesus arrives, help has arrived, and healing has arrived. Listen, our faith is often going to be tested in some of those arenas, in some of those ways, in some of those details. Things that don't look so good, things that look too late, things that we've given up on, things that are beyond our control. When we've tested every other avenue, we don't know where to turn. Listen, we see these examples of faith and the difference faith has made in the lives of these people who so desperately, desperately needed Jesus. That's how to walk. Walking by faith, waiting for the King to come again. Because he promised us we're going with him to the other side.
Thank you for listening to Redeemed. For more information, you can email us at pastorwesgunther@gmail.com. Thank you.